You're listening to Field Chats, an Earth Force production. On this podcast, we explore the essentials of Environmental Applied Civics, an educational approach where youth partner with adults to solve real local problems. Keep listening for a living library of best practices, insights, and stories from the field. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to Field Chats, Environmental Applied Civics Essentials, brought to you by Earth Force. I'm Taylor Ruffin, and I'm here with my colleagues Kristen and Alyssa, and of course, Haley on the back end. And today we're continuing season 4 of the podcast with Inventories. And we'll be talking about how to integrate them into a classroom or a program and give some real life examples. But first, crew, let's talk about what we're seeing and hearing at Earth Force. And like, what's one thing you've been thinking about this week?
I have been thinking a lot about reflection. It is coming to the end of some fiscal years for many folks and the end of our summer. And so we've been talking a lot about reflection as a team. And we just had a really fabulous discussion with our flagship partners about reflection at the end of the process at step 6. So I've been thinking about reflection this week.
How about you, Taylor?
I would say that systems level work. We at Earth Force, I am also engaged in a lot of coalitions. So these kind of conglomerates of all different types of organizations on many levels. And yesterday I was at a coalition meeting and just talking about how we can do more together and then how that work is done. And it seems somewhat daunting, but exciting at the same time. So looking forward to just working with more people and being able to do more together, I think is what's really been on my mind this week.
I love that. Yeah. I have found myself thinking about that systems level too, but also then we've been doing some educator professional development and some deep dives into the intricacies of the process and how it's done, how it works for students and educators. So it's I feel like my mind has been sort of in this space between the details of the specifics of the process and the language and all of that. And then all the way up to the systems level work and how we integrate this into districts and other spaces. So just that kind of broad span. So that's been great. And I think my brain is tired. It's a lot, but yeah, thanks all. So we are here today to talk about inventories with you all. And this is in step 1 of the Earth Force process. So step 1 is obviously the beginning. But before we dive into inventories or data collection, there's a couple of things that generally happen first. One is we sort of set the foundation for this work and the building blocks. Sometimes we want to make sure with young people they're ready for this different type of learning and this different type of solving problems in their community. And so we have some grounding in that. We might do a respect agreement. We talk with educators a lot about using a lens. So maybe that is your curricular lens. You're focused on natural hazards or watersheds or something. So using a lens and then defining your community, deciding, is this your classroom? Is this your schoolyard? Is this your town or community? Or a region or neighborhood. And so those kind of things will help you really launch into this process. And then you're ready for inventories. So you're ready then to really investigate the community and collect data on environmental strengths and issues. That's what our first step is really about. And using those environmental inventories that are rooted in meaningful inquiry. And so we're going to get into what some of those examples are and such, but the bottom line is this is when we really start asking questions with young people, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What is this like in your life? What's this like in your community? And starting to hear from them and sort of get their thoughts, and then digging a little bit deeper into okay, well, let's go out and, test that waterway, or let's go out and talk to these people and let's see what the data out there and how that connects to what you're thinking. And just a really exciting, really cool step to enter and start to develop inquiries. So I think, Kristen, you're going to share with us maybe some examples and such around that.
Totally. And I'll start by saying that there is no one way that an inventory can look. There is, in fact, a myriad of ways. So some examples of what an inventory can be. We have a fabulous resource called the Community Inventory List that goes over, about a dozen of them and some different examples. So an inventory can be something like straight up data collection. You're doing a macroinvertebrate study out in the stream next to your school. You're doing some soil and water samplings. That's an example of a really kind of quantitative, field-based example. But there are a lot of other things that you could do, such as like speaking with community members, doing a survey, having lots of conversations, um, mapping out even who is in your community that you would like to go chat and have a conversation with. So those are some more qualitative ways to go about it, those interviews and conversations. A few other examples, one that we really like to play up here at Earth Force are maps, because not only are they cool to look at, they're also chock full of information and can really base your inventory in place where you are. And so maps can be something as simple as hopping on the computer and looking at your neighborhood or your county in Google Maps and seeing what is there. How much green space do we have? How close is the nearest grocery store, for example? That's a pretty popular one that we do. There are also some more intense maps, like the National Risk Index map. That was a really popular one when talking about natural hazards. The National Risk Index map can look at either the county level or I believe the census tract level and can give you kind of a metric on how vulnerable a given area is to all sorts of different hazards, whether that is flooding, wildfires, avalanches, depending on where you live. And so all of those maps are, again, chock full of information and might be more appropriate for an older student group, especially. You could also make your own map. Again, a super valuable exercise to go through of literally mapping out your schoolyard and kind of physically drawing where you're seeing these things. And then I've had the opportunity to do, when we've done some more in-person or more outdoor PDs over the past couple years, to do some nature journaling based activities as a community inventory. And these have been really special, again, to really ground you in place. They're often also quite meditative, which I find is very nice. And so an example of some of these nature journaling ones could be sound mapping. Our friends at Coastal Bays, Maryland Coastal Bays program introduced us to this one. So, hey, shout out y'all. Thank you. And sound mapping was just what it sounded like. We sat in the quiet and listened and recorded and drew what we were hearing around us. Zoom in, zoom out is another popular one. We can link that in the description. But this type of inventory is really awesome because it builds some of those observational skills in your young people before even jumping into problem finding. And that can be super valuable to just start with some appreciative inquiry around your community. What is your favorite thing about your community? What do you love about it? And I think too, that really places you in the community as well and gets some gratitude flowing and gets youth to see themselves as part of, members of their community as themselves. We'll also share a quick resource in the description, a conversation with an educator about how they did an inventory. I believe that was like an iterative example too. So check that out. And then Taylor is going to share with us some traditional ecological knowledge about inventories.
Yeah, and this is something that SJ, our other colleague, kind of brought up when we were talking about inventories, and it really rings true with essentially what you've already said, Kristen, kind of that relationship before responsibility. And I think the traditional ecological knowledge is really rooted in place-based local elements on a holistic and rooted in values space. So it's like this value. It's like, oh, what's my relationship to this defined community that we have? So like drawing upon that lived experience and putting in that perspective, as well as being grateful. So like this gratitude. So I think with those pieces, also seeing who is there, like what is good, like leaning into the assets. I think that's one piece when we talk about the Earth Force process that is very important, especially when you're working in a community that is kind of stricken with it, or even in media is trying to like depict your community as, oh, it's all bad, when you're working with those young folks who are like, oh no, here are the good things, because that could also be a place to start as well, to be like, oh, what are our community members already doing as it relates to these topics or these themes that we're exploring, And that's why I really like maps. And one thing I'm always trying to figure out where to put these in, but existing plans. So like a lot of my
Mm,
work was in natural hazard resilience, and a lot of
Yep.
local or regional places already had plans in place. Like, oh, this is what our community is doing if these things are happening. Or sometimes you have sustainability or climate action plans that already exist. So
yeah.
pulling those in as an inventory, like, oh, wow, look at all this great stuff that's
Right.
happening. And maybe these are places for us to continue our
Yeah.
investigation. So it's not just what is here, but also who is here, as well as slowing down before solving. I think we always talk about that
Mhm.
in the
Mm,
Earth Force
yeah.
process. And like, as we
Hmm.
talk about our view of identifying strategies to action. So those all, I think it's very holistic. I think they all really
Hmm.
contribute to this lovely experience. And rooting it in place, rooting it in holistic, and then drawing in on those values with those students. So that's kind of where I think refining some of those inventories could happen. That you can include that
Hmm.
inquiry process or that inventory, having all of these pieces to really yield an amazing experience for your young folks to kick off the process.
Awesome. Well said. Yeah. So, a couple of questions that we hear sometimes are like, how do I get started? That's pretty straightforward. Just start. No, we will say, like, oftentimes, whatever your lens is, again, like if it's, water quality or watersheds, there might be particular inventories like water or water quality testing that make the most sense. But we recommend doing a few inventories, like at least three if you have the time, and thinking about doing maybe a qualitative, a quantitative, and then maybe a student decided one. So, as the facilitator of this process, you might have certain things you need to collect or need to check off your list. So, but just making sure that students have a chance to, like, do they want to go interview people, or do they want to go see or explore, or do some nature journaling, or, whatever those different examples are. But yeah, just choosing a couple of inventories that make sense for data collection, and then get into it.
Yeah, because like starting is always the hardest part. And I think identifying,
Hmm.
oh, what inventories do I
Mhm.
do with my students? And I think, yeah, utilizing that lens or that theme or that subject,
Hmm.
and pulling upon those inventories. And so really kind of doing some of that pre-work, or in addition to engaging your students to understand like, well, what are you interested in? What do you
Hmm.
want to investigate might also be helpful. But sometimes
Yeah.
you got to do a mixture of both, I think sometimes.
Yeah. That, like, inquiry place. Yeah. We also might hear, like, how long should this take, or could this take? What do you think, Kristen?
Well, just as there are many different modes of doing a community inventory, this answer is just as variable, and it can be based on, how long do you have with your students.
Hmm.
This could range anywhere from, half an hour if you've only got your students for a little while to go do a walkabout and do a nature journaling exercise like that one I did. The sound mapping, I think maybe we were there for 20 minutes,
Hmm.
and then had a reflection about it as a group. But if you've got some time and you want to do all three inventories, like you were saying, Alyssa, it could span over the course of a few days.
Hmm.
And then, compare, contrast like all the data that you're getting. So yeah, very
Totally.
variable.
Yeah. Oh, those good Earth Force answers of like, well, there's no
But I think,
straight answer here.
yeah, I think it helps because then you pull in those parameters. So what might
Uh-huh.
be
Yep.
some of
Yeah.
your, I guess you could think of them as barriers, but or you could just think of them as parameters. Like, oh, I have my
Hmm.
students for this amount of time. This is our topic, and so that kind of can help whittle down what inventories you can do. So that
Yeah.
variability, but I think it also lends to being very place based and very relevant and very local. So I think it can be a challenge in one sphere, but then it also can be like, well,
Hmm.
I know what my parameters are. Therefore, these
Mhm.
are the types of inventories I think we can really engage
Totally.
in.
Yeah. Or
Yeah. And I
criteria,
mean,
as we like to say.
mhm.
There you go.
And that leads us really well to our last frequently asked question of some common barriers we hear of, like, oh, I can't leave my classroom, or where should I go? And again, just
Hmm.
bringing in those criteria of like, well, if you're um, confined to your classroom or to your schoolyard, you can pick an inventory that you can do online or within that like small geographic space.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, maps, 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 maps. They're so great. And like of all, like kindergartners understand maps. Like they can look at visually at things and like understand and compare. And, and maps are engaging for all levels. So maps are a great one to do. What's one thing you hope listeners take away from this conversation? Let's see. I will start us off and just say, I hope that you all walk away being clear on like a few easy ideas you can just take and get going. Like you can say, I'm going to do a couple of inventories that we're going to put the inventory list in the show notes. And then you can look at that and be like, oh, cool, surveys and maps and maps and maps. So I hope that you feel like there were some good examples and things you can move forward with really easily. Kristen, what do you think?
I hope folks hear us when we say that this can look any way, any shape, and that there's no one correct way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Taylor?
Yeah, I would say the emphasis on like when you're done with this process, you have a list of strengths and concerns. So really having that equity, like you are also there to identify strengths. So the inventory process, or it's not always trying to find the bad, it's also trying to find the whole and also the really good things. So I really want y'all, when you're doing these inventories, to point at those assets and say, okay, we're going to bring that along the process, as well as those concerns that we identify as well.
I'm so glad you said that. I was sitting here like, oh, I wish we could end on something like that. And you found a way to bring it in. So thanks, Taylor. Thanks, everybody, so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
That's it for this episode of Field Chats. If you found this episode helpful, please rate the show or share it with a colleague. Thanks so much for being part of the movement to change how young people learn. We'll see you next time.